Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to read the story called Ivy's Icicle by Gary Bauer. We read some of his books back in the fall, one that talked about the wagon and one that talked about treasures. Today we're going to talk about Ivy's Icicle. And I saved it for this time of year because the plot takes place, the setting is in the winter time. So it's called Ivy's Icicles. Ivy gazed out the dining room window. When are they going to come? She asked. Any minute, Mom said. Your dad called and said the flight was right on time. She glanced at the table. Forks go on the left, Ivy. Remember? Oops, said Ivy. While Ivy rearranged the silverware, two bright headlights beamed through the window. Light danced around the room, making the dishes sparkle. Ivy's little sister Emily scampered to the door, clapping her hands. Nana's here! Nana's here! Do you like to watch out the window when you have company coming? Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? Bells jingled and snow swirled into the house when the door swung open. Dad helped Grandma step out of the cold air as sounds of laughter and stomping of boots filled the happy room. Ivy's brother Dustin galloped down the stairs. Grandma! He shouted. Emily couldn't stop bouncing up and down. Nana, Nana! She giggled. For a moment, Ivy acted shy. Then she rushed to Grandma and hugged her like she'd never let go. What a warm welcome, Grandma chuckled. Now let me have a look at you. She stepped back and peeked over the top of her glasses. My, how my Ivy has grown, she said. A grin spread across Ivy's face. Grandma always said that when she came to visit. Dinner was wonderful. Everything looked so nice, said Grandma. Ivy set the table, said Mom. Grandma sipped her tea. So grown up. After dinner, the children gave Grandma presents they had made. She gave them presents, too. Emily got a ballerina dress. She squealed and twirled with glee. Dustin tore into his present like a hungry wolf. Then he became quiet. Grandma had knitted him a sweater. Thank you, he said politely. Ivy also got a sweater. Oh, Grandma, I love it, she said, holding it up. Said Grandma. I hope it fits. I can't believe how much you've grown, child. Ivy began to pick up pieces of wrapping paper. Not so fast, Grandma told her. I have another gift for each of you. Emily's second present was a cuddly little lamb. She buried her face in the soft wool. Dustin perked up as he opened his. A basketball, he exclaimed. Thanks, Grandma. Ivy slowly peeled the wrapping paper off her present. Then she gasped. Staring at her was the most beautiful porcelain doll she had ever seen. She was so happy that she could hardly speak. Thank you, she finally managed to whisper. Ivy loved Christmas. She loved Grandma. And she loved her new doll. I'll name you Hannah, she said. Why do you think the boy got quiet when he had got a sweater? Yeah, it probably wasn't exactly what he was hoping for, but he was very polite about it, wasn't he? He said thank you and he didn't complain. So he was being very respectful. The next day, Ivy had a tea party with Emily. Do lambs like tea? Emily asked. I suppose so, Ivy said. Not me, said Emily. I like chocolate milk. Ivy carefully took her porcelain doll from the shelf where she had said it the night before. "Won't you join us for tea, Hannah?" she said, very properly. She pretended to pour the tea for her doll and then turned to Emily. "Tea?" "Chocolate milk," said Emily. "Chocolate milk, please," Ivy corrected her. "Chocolate milk, please," Emily said. As Ivy passed a cup to Emily, Dustin entered the room. He bounced his basketball on the floor. Thud, thud, thud. "Didn't Mom say not to bounce the ball in the house?" Dustin immediately stopped. "Oops, I forgot. But watch this." He gave the ball a quick spin and tried to balance it on his finger, but it spun away from him and landed with a crash right in the middle of the tea party. "Dustin!" Ivy shrieked. "I didn't mean it," Dustin stammered. "It was an accident." Ivy looked at the mess. She could hardly believe her eyes. One of Hannah's tiny porcelain hands had broken off. Ivy tried not to cry, but she just couldn't help it. She burst into tears. It took only a few minutes for Mom to glue Hannah's hand back on. Dustin watched from across the room. "I'm sorry," he said over and over again. "There," said Mom, setting the doll on its shelf. "When the glue dries, it will look like new." Tearfully, Ivy examined her doll. She could still see a thin, faint crack. "It will never be like new," she thought. Mom took Dustin's basketball away from him. His head hung low as he followed her out of the room. "I hope he never gets it back," Ivy said to herself. She felt miserable. How could he be so careless? Of course Dustin didn't mean to break her doll, but he did break it. And saying he was sorry 100 times wasn't going to fix it. And the more Ivy pouted about what Dustin did, the more miserable she felt. That afternoon, Ivy and her friends Megan and Jenna made a snowman in Ivy's yard. Nearby, Dustin and his friends Wyatt and Aaron threw snowballs at each other. "What should we use for the snowman's eyes?" Ivy asked. "How about these?" said Megan. She twisted 2 pine cones into the snowman's face. "We can give him a pine cone mouth too," said Ivy. "And buttons," said Jenna. But what can we use for his nose?" "Maybe a carrot?" Megan asked. Ivy looked up at her house. "Or an icicle." All the girls looked up. Long, slender icicles hung from the edge of the roof. "They're awfully high," Jenna said. "I don't think we can reach 'em." "Maybe the boys can," said Megan. Ivy scowled. "I don't want Dustin to come near my snowman. He ruins everything." But the girls couldn't get the icicles to fall, so Dustin, Aaron, and Wyatt came over. Dustin knocked one down with a snowball on his first try. "Thank you," said Megan and Jenna. Ivy didn't say anything. She wouldn't even look at her brother. She was really mad, wasn't she? Here's a picture from the front cover. The sun sank slowly behind the hill, and one by one the children said goodbye. Little stars speckled in darkening sky as Ivy trudged through deep snow to her front porch. The windy evening seemed so peaceful. She didn't want to go inside yet. Besides, Dustin's in there. The snowman caught her eye. Its long, icy nose pointed straight to her. It looked yummy. Do you like to eat icicles? I used to do that too. She plucked the icicle from the snowman's face and sucked the end of it. It felt cold against her lips. Suddenly, Ivy felt cold all over, and she shivered. She noticed the shimmering lights, Christmas lights, that wrapped around the pine tree on the porch. Their soft glow made her feel warmer. For a long time, she just looked at the lights and thought. She thought about Christmas and Grandma. She thought about how much she liked her presents, especially her doll. Then she thought about what Dustin did. She shivered again. Why did he have to break my doll? She wondered as she made her way indoors. After supper, the family sat in the living room. Mama looked at a magazine and Grandma knitted while Dad read a story to Emily. A crackling fire in the fireplace made the room as cozy as toast. Want to play checkers, Ivy? Dustin asked. Not with you, she mumbled coldly. Her words surprised her. She glanced around the room, hoping no one else heard. The end, said Dad, closing the book. He got up and carried Emily to the window. Look at those big icicles, he said. They need to come down, don't you think? But they're so pretty, Dad, said Ivy. Do you have to knock them down? Heavy icicles are dangerous, Dad replied. They can hurt people. They are not good for the roof either. Do we need more insulation, Dad? Dustin asked. Ivy rolled her eyes. He thinks he's so smart, she thought. What's insulation? Asked Emily. Grandma held up her knitting. It's like a sweater that keeps the house warm. That's right, Dad agreed. Icicles are a sign that we're losing heat. Mercy, said Grandma, smiling at Ivy. Let's not lose our heart. Our heat, sorry. We certainly don't want to grow cold, do we? Ivy looked away. She wondered if Grandma heard what she had said to Dustin. Upstairs, as the girls were getting ready for bed, Emily ran to the bedroom window and pointed. Look at that big one! Ivy looked. Just outside her window hung the biggest icicle she'd ever seen. It glowed in the moonlight. Is Daddy going to knock it down? Emily asked. Yes, said Ivy. Good. Big icicles can hurt people. Emily fell asleep right away, but Ivy couldn't. She felt guilty about how she spoke to Dustin, but she wasn't sorry. Then she felt guilty for not being sorry. Her heart wasn't warm toward Dustin like it used to be, and she knew it. It felt cold, like a cold, heavy icicle growing inside of her. Dad's word echoed in her ears. Those icicles need to come down. Ivy closed her eyes. Her mind pictured icicles. The imaginary icicle grew bigger and bigger and heavier until it seemed like its weight would pull the roof down. She imagined trying again and again to hit it with snowballs, but the icicle just wouldn't come down. She thought about Dustin. It bothered her how easily he had knocked down the icicle, and something inside of her started to feel cold again. I wished I had a sweater for my heart. So she was having a hard time forgiving Dustin, and so she didn't feel close to him anymore. She felt like she was pushing him away, and that's what we call a cold heart. In the morning, Ivy went to Grandma's room. The door was open, so she peeked inside. Grandma? The room was quiet. Grandma's shawl and a pair of white gloves draped over the back of the chair. An old mirror sat on the dresser. Next to the mirror sat Grandma's glasses and lots of other interesting things. Without hesitating, Ivy clipped on some earrings and looked in the mirror. Then she tried on the shawl, gloves, and glasses. My, how you've grown, she said playfully. So she was pretending she's Grandma. A noise startled her. Quickly she took off the glasses, but as she tried to take off the earrings, her elbow bumped the glasses. Off the dresser they fell with a clatter against the hard floor. When Ivy bent down to get them, she was horrified. Grandma's glasses lay in two pieces. She picked up the pieces and turned around. In the doorway stood Grandma. Oh dear. I'm so sorry, Grandma, Ivy sobbed, showing her the pieces. But instead of scolding her, Grandma pulled her close and hugged her tightly. She said nothing at all as Ivy cried in her arms. Finally, Ivy dried her eyes. Aren't you angry? She sniffled. No, dear, came a gentle reply. I forgive you. Rays of sunshine poured through the window, making icicles sparkle like diamonds. Drip, drip, drip. They were starting to melt. Something was melting in Ivy's heart, too. She began to understand how badly Dustin must have felt when he broke her doll's hand, and for the first time in 2 days, she felt sorry for someone besides herself. At that moment, Ivy made a decision. I'm going to forgive him. Grandma's soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Icicles will certainly come down on a sunny day like this. Ivy smiled. One has already. Meaning that she had decided in her heart that she was going to forgive Dustin. So that meant that cold feeling that she had in her heart was warming up. A few minutes later, Ivy saw Dustin in the living room. Do you want to play checkers? She asked. Dustin looked surprised. Sure, he said. The children set up the checkerboard. You can go first, Ivy said cheerfully. Dustin paused. I'm really sorry about what I did to your doll, he said. I know, said Ivy. I forgive you. Will you forgive me for being so mean to you last night? Dustin moved a checker. Of course, he said. It's your turn. Near the end of the day, Ivy stood by Grandma's rocking chair and watched her knit. Grandma, said Ivy. Yes, dear. How come you forgave me so quickly? Because I've been forgiven so many times, said Grandma. Ivy rested her head on Grandma's shoulder. I want to be a quick forgiver, too, she said. Grandma breathed a gentle sigh and said in a soft whisper, My, how my Ivy has grown. So now she's not talking about growing, getting tall. She's talking about in her heart she was able to decide that she was going to forgive her brother. And that is the end of the story. So, boys and girls, adults as well as children struggle with forgiving people. But when we don't forgive someone, it actually hurts us more than it hurts them. So if someone's done something to you and you're angry at them, now's the time to let that sunshine melt your heart. Make the decision that you're going to forgive, and you'll feel so much better. You have a great day, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.